met Jason when I moved to Oregon in 2010. We started dating not long after, and it was pretty great. As all relationships do, we hit a dry run after a few years due to hectic work schedules, little free time, and just not being able to be around one another much. It was welcomed news when we were both actually able to plan our vacations together in such a way that we both had a solid week off simultaneously. Well, Jason went crazy planning, and being a native to Oregon, he was all about the outdoors. I was more of a stay-in with a book and pizza girl, but for the sake of breaking up the monotony, I let him take the lead on this one. Jason was super excited that his uncle let him borrow the cabin for a few days. He said it was out in the middle of Elliott State Forest, and would be great to get out of the city, just the two of us. I guess he was capitalizing on the romance novels I read because it totally hit a nerve with me on a good level. The night before, he went crazy packing. We had clothes, portable heaters, food, and Jason, in typical guy fashion, had his survival pack. It had knives, 300 flashlights, and for some odd reason, mountain climbing equipment. He watched a lot of survival shows. I let him have his fun. I was more excited to be alone with him finally, and to be surrounded by the forest. The peace and quiet would be bliss compared to the sounds of traffic day and night. Besides, I couldn't remember the last time I saw the stars. The next day, we drove to his uncle's to get the keys to the place, and had to visit for a while for pleasantry's sake. He and Jason caught up on old times and shared a few stories over lunch. The only strange thing came when he started telling Jason about the cabin. He asked Jason if he had any protection. Jason told him that we didn't own a firearm of any kind. He asked him if he wanted to borrow one of his, to which Jason and I said no. I asked him if wild animals were that big of a concern out there, to which he simply shook his head and said, "Never mind, I'm sure you two will be fine." Well, I tried to shake it off best I could, but damn, did that put a weird feeling in my gut. In any case, Jason got the keys, and we were bound for our little cabin in the woods. Jason insisted on playing his awful playlist on the drive, but I gritted my teeth and let him have his moment. After a while, civilization began to be swallowed by the thick forest and winding roads that took us deeper into it. We finally reached a point where the road just stopped. There was a spot to pull the vehicle over into a kind of makeshift shoulder. "All right, baby, we have to walk from here," he said, smiling as he got out of the car and opened the trunk. Great, I thought as I got out and followed suit. We loaded up our packs with all our bedding, clothes, food, and supplies, and made a solid 2-mile hike down an old, worn, man-made trail. Around 6:30, we arrived at the cabin, and I was not disappointed. It was everything you'd imagine it would be: rustic, cozy, surrounded by thick forest, but well cared for. The kind of place you could rent out if need be. I could already see myself on the large porch, feet kicked up, and my newest read with the warm sun on me. Jason fumbled with the key for a bit, but we gained entry. Inside was even better. It was ordained with antlers, wood, and graveling all over the walls, and even a big fireplace right next to an old box television set that was no doubt there for aesthetic value. The kitchen had modern appliances, and even the bathroom was up to date and clean. This little slice of heaven in the middle of nowhere. I half wanted to ask Jason to convince his uncle to let us live here. After the initial shock and awe were over, we set straight into making ourselves at home. I put away food and the likes while Jason put toiletries and bedroom things away. After a while, we were at home in our cabin in the woods and snuggled up next to a fire, fantasizing about leaving life and running away to live here. Jason toyed with the idea of becoming a wild man and living off the grid and from the land, but we were both too spoiled to rough it. We settled for laughing, talking, and making out. Needless to say, the first night there was perfection. The next day was mostly spent walking around small trails outside the cabin, nature watching, and each of us relaxing in our own ways. I would read outside while it was sunny, and then read some more while soaking in the huge soaker bathtub next to candlelight. Cliché as it seems, it did the trick for relaxing me. Jason was chopping firewood with an axe he found leaning against the cabin. That night, after a romantic dinner of homemade chicken Alfredo and the finest $13 wine the drugstore had to offer, Jason and I prepared for bed. Of course, we couldn't let such a romantic setting go to waste, so naturally, Jason started getting frisky. Light pecks and Eskimo kisses turned into heavy making out, and then, well, you know, right in the middle, Jason hops out of bed and rushes over to his pack next to a large dresser. He fumbles around in the dark, and I hear some electronic buttons being pressed. I grew curious and turned on the lamp on the nightstand next to me. "Oh no, we totally are not Jason," I yelled as I watched him fumble with the high-definition camera he was setting up to film us. "Babe, come on, like really. Most guys look at porn, I just want to look at you, can we please?" He pleaded with a very good argument, if I must admit. I thought about it, but reason reigned supreme. "No sir, we cannot. Imagine if this leaks, and we lose our jobs or something. You want it, then it's off camera, but you better hurry because I'm losing the mood." Jason hesitated, but wasn't about to call my bluff. He turned the camera off and set it on the dresser, lens pointed away from us. Maybe it was the cool night, amazing dinner, or relaxing atmosphere of the rustic cabin in the secluded forest, but the sex was amazing. We fell asleep tangled in one another, and it was blissful. The next morning, Jason was up before me. He was in the shower, and I wrapped a robe around myself and was heading into the kitchen to start coffee when something odd caught my eye. "That little asshole," I thought as I noticed the camera facing the bed and the red light blinking. I picked it up and tried to figure out the buttons. It was confusing with Jason singing horribly in the shower. I managed to flip out the screen and find playback. I was horrified by what I saw. At first, it was me, just video of my face extremely close. It would pan up and down from my hair to my chin and across my naked body. I figured Jason was being a pervert and was about to toss the camera in the shower, but then the view panned out. There next to me in bed was Jason. Who the hell was filming us if both Jason and I were in bed side by side? A cold chill ran down my spine that I haven't felt before in my entire life or after. I screamed for Jason. He stumbled and tripped on the way out of the shower, barely managing to wrap himself in a towel first. I showed him the footage, and I don't think I have seen him so frightened before. We both searched the entire cabin inside and out for any way someone could enter and found nothing. We had the only key, and Jason's uncle wouldn't drive hours out of the way in the dead of night just to play a sick joke. We cut our vacation short as we both knew something bad would happen if we stayed again. We packed up as fast as possible, racing against daylight, surely leaving some things behind. The hike back to our car was stressful, as Jason constantly looked over his shoulder and kept saying someone was following us. Was he telling the truth or just scared? I don't know, but I didn't stop to find out. After making it to the car, we tore ass out of that place, never to return. Ever since then, when Jason and I vacation, we do it in the city. My wife worked for a large insurance company and recently received a long overdue promotion to senior agent late in 2018. The catch was that there were no available openings where we lived. She agreed to relocate to secure the significant pay raise and benefits package. Our son Aiden just turned 11 and Sarah stayed long enough to celebrate his birthday and help us pack the house with the movers. Not long after that, she caught a flight to our new home in Birmingham, Alabama to begin work as soon as possible. It was stressful, depressing, and caused a few arguments with Aiden. This is the only home he'd ever known, so it was expected and understandable. We were to finish up with the movers and drive to our new home a few days after Sarah. We got the last bits of our belongings loaded up later than expected, and we were tired. But with the bedding packed up and nowhere to sleep, we decided to go ahead and hit the road. 7 in the evening found the sun beginning to set and our drive just beginning with both Aiden and I already exhausted. But we both missed Sarah, and we just wanted it all to be over. A few hours later, and after a pit stop at a Waffle House, we were deep on I-20 heading towards Birmingham. Heading towards home. It was dark, pitch black and ink-eye dark, the kind that headlights barely pierce. The highway turned into a 2-lane for a long stretch surrounded by thick woods on each side. One vehicle passed us in 30 minutes, and that was miles behind us. I'm not saying we were dead alone out here on this road in the woods, but if anyone was around, we damn sure couldn't see them. The road started winding a bit in various places, but with no one around and Aiden asleep, I just used both lanes so that I could handle the turns without decreasing speed. In all honesty, I was sleepy myself, but the GPS said we were under a couple hours away from our destination, so I would speed every chance I got. There was this one wicked turn that I rounded, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't see the slow 35 miles per hour sign posted. I ignored it as I hugged the turn at around 55 miles per hour. It was then that it happened. Piercing the blackness all around us, the red and blue flashing lights lit up the night like flares. They bounced off of the towering pines around us as the patrol car sped up behind me. He didn't have sirens on. He didn't need to. Anyone who would pretend they didn't see this cop in the middle of this dark nothingness would be outright lying. Shit. That was basically all that ran through my mind. Aiden was waking up because of the lights and decrease in speed as I pulled over. Sarah was going to kick my ass over this ticket. With it being so dark, his headlights behind me were blinding. I tilted my mirror up for some relief and readied my license and insurance. Oddly, the officer did not step out of the vehicle. It just remained there behind us on the side of this dark and empty interstate. Lights flashing and headlights pouring into my cab. I was confused as to what was taking so long. A good solid 2 minutes went by, and after Aiden asking me what's wrong several times, I leaned out of my window and faced the police car, shielding my eyes from the bright lights. "Officer, something I can help with?" I asked. There was no response. The door to the squad car never moved, but my heart did when I heard a voice just to the front of my car. "Sir, please remain in your vehicle, for my safety and yours." I pulled myself back into my driver's seat properly and completely confused. I was all eyes, and I swear on my mother, not a damn person ever got out of that police car. "So why are you speeding in my county?" the officer asked as he shined his flashlight into my car. Aiden squinted and looked away from the light, while I just couldn't get over the fact that this guy simply appeared in front of my car. "Yeah, I'm really sorry, sir. I didn't see the speed limit, and I'm just a little tired and trying to get my son home," I answered in the most respectful and apologetic tone I could. The officer lowered his flashlight, and I could see that his face was badly scared and burned on the right side. Other than that, he was a hefty man with a strong build. Not sure exactly where I was, I looked at his shoulder patch. "City of Brookwood Police, Officer Parnell." "Hang tight, boss. I'm going to be right back with ya," Officer Parnell said as he took my documents and began walking to his squad car. I looked over at Aiden, who was shaking his head at me. "Mom is going to be pissed, Dad." I just shook my head, but was again legitimately freaked out by what I saw next. He was in his car, inside it, but once again I never saw the door open. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting behind the wheel, motionless, staring straight ahead. I couldn't see his features, only his silhouette through the headlights, but I could see him just motionless like a statue. What the hell is he doing, just sitting there? After several minutes, and even my son picking up the feeling that something was off, he opens the door this time and steps out of the cruiser. He walks over to my window again and leans down, producing a ticket and my documents. He asks me to sign the speeding ticket, in which I do. "Listen, guy, these roads at night are killers. That's why I let you up. Slow it down out here. I don't want to be scraping you off the concrete because you disobeyed the speed postings." With that, he stands up robotically, turns stiffly, and walks straight back to his cruiser and gets in. What a cryptic thing to say in front of my son, I thought, and am I free to go? I sat there for a minute before just chancing it and easing on the gas, slowly pulling away. After around a quarter of a mile, all lights behind me vanished, just gone. This was alarming, as in this kind of dark on a 2-lane road, you could see headlights damn near a mile away, but his were just gone. I dismissed it and blamed the weird happenings on the dark, stress of the move and lack of sleep. But deep down I knew what I saw, and so did Aiden. We made it to Birmingham and collapsed on beds with no sheets to sleep while we could. The next evening I decided to take Aiden and drive to the address on the ticket Officer Parnell issued me for speeding. I wanted to pay it and have it over before Sarah found, and Brookwood was where I had to go. After an hour and a half I arrived in the very small town and made my way to the courthouse that doubled as a police substation. Aiden and I went inside and approached the service desk, where a middle-aged woman wrapped in a light day blanket sat waiting to help. "Yes, sir, how can I help you?" she asked as I approached her, smiling with Aiden just behind me. She smiled at Aiden as I produced the ticket from my pocket and handed it to her. "Yes, ma'am, I was a little careless while coming into Birmingham last night and was doing a little speeding, but one of your guys got me, and I'd like to just go ahead and pay the fine now," I said, looking down at Aidan, who was shaking his head at me. The woman looked the ticket over and her eyes got wide as she shook her head back and forth. "Excuse me, sir, I'll be right back." She gets up with the ticket in hand and walks behind a door leading to the back of the building, where I could see police officers moving about through a glass window. After a short while, she comes out with a police officer. "Sir, my name is Captain Davis here with Brookwood Police. I'll tell you what, you just moved to Birmingham, right?" he asks me curiously. I nod my head confused. Yes sir, that's right. Just in from Louisiana with my wife and son here." The captain smiles and nods. "Well, I'd hate to add another expense onto your family, what with you all just moving. Tell you what, I'm going to treat this as a warning, and you folks just go on with your move." I was completely dumbfounded. I didn't understand a bit, but I wasn't about to argue with the man letting me off the hook. "Okay sir, thank you very much," I said as I looked around for Aidan, who had wandered near a bulletin board close to the exit. The captain nodded and proceeded to crumple up the ticket as I turned and walked away. As I approached my son to get him and head for my car before things got any weirder, Aidan stops me. Dad, he says in a whisper, but with urgency. I walk over and he points to the bulletin board. My heart felt like it would explode as I read it and looked at the pictures. It was a picture of Officer Parnell on a memorial for fallen officers. There was no mistaking his build and the scars on his face. Officer Jesse Parnell, an Iraq War veteran who was injured by a wide blast in 2004, served the city of Brookwood with honor and distinction until his tragic death in a late-night traffic accident on I-20 on August of 2014. He is remembered by his mother, fiancée, and daughter. Heaven is a little safer with your presence, Officer Parnell. I felt sick to my stomach. I grabbed Aidan and almost jogged to the car. We drove back to Birmingham, making sure to obey the speed limit. I didn't want to get pulled over again. Ever. I grew up living with my cousin Gilbert. He lost his father at an early age, and he and his mom started living with my family shortly after, as money was hard to come by for a single mom. If you asked anyone what it was like, they would no doubt answer with chaotic. See, for some reason, Gilbert and I fought a lot. I mean about everything from day one. Bedrooms, food, television stations, the weather. Any excuse we needed, we fought. I can't really say why, but during those days, I hated him, and I don't think it would be a stretch to imagine he hated me also. Looking back now, I wonder if it was because I was young and didn't understand that his living with us and taking up our space and resources wasn't his choice, but a necessity. So that was us, we fought. Days trickled into months and those into years, and nothing really changed except we became adults. It ended though, the fighting, the anger, and the hatred. It all ended that day at Debbie's birthday party. I must have been 19 by this time, and Gilbert was only a year younger than me. We were at a close family friend's birthday party, and we did a great job of making it awkward for everyone by fighting over the most ignorant things. This time was a little bad because it got physical. I remember actually slapping Gilbert across the face with a cord from a toaster. He retaliated by kicking a chair over that hit me in the knee and fell into one of the guests' babies. We both apologized, but the damage was done. It was kind of a party killer, and shortly after, everyone started to go home. It was getting dark, so we used it as an excuse to go as well. I was driving, and Gilbert, of course, bummed a ride from me like usual. Looking back on it, for two people who hated one another, we sure spent a lot of time together. So there we were, side by side in the car, driving home together after successfully ruining a birthday party and hurting a kid, a proud moment for us both. This, of course, started another argument as to where the blame belonged. We ended up on a back road off the main interstate because some overnight road construction had sprung up while we were at the party. I didn't really pay attention as the argument was getting heated. The road was dark and getting darker. Where we were at was kind of rural, so there wasn't much in the way of street lights. Guess we didn't pay it any mind. What was important at that time was placing blame and hurling insults. Yes, we were so into it that we barely managed to notice passing the lone black man standing on the side of the empty road. We kept going at it. Gilbert would turn on the radio to drown me out, and I'd reach over and turn it off. About a mile down the dark two-lane road, We passed another lone black man, just standing there, only illuminated by our headlights as we passed. It got a bit quieter in the car as we both paid a little more attention to what was going on. Gilbert looked over his shoulder and back at me, but I had nothing to say to him yet. Another 3/4 of a mile, and true to form, there he was again on the side of the road. This time there was no mistaking it. It was the very same man, and we both knew it. Gilbert reached over and turned the radio off himself this time, then looked at me with a face I have never seen on him. Terror. "Claudia, was that?" he asked, hesitating. I looked at him blankly and in shock. "Yeah, I really hope not," I answered. But I knew it was. It had to be. Unless a group of very similar-looking black men were out playing a prank in the night for one random car on the road. It was dead quiet in the car now. All we heard were the sounds of us going over the cracks in the road and the wind. The strange, dead peace would not last. To our terror, but not surprise, we were coming up on the same man on the side of the road once more. This time, I had to get a better look, if not only to satisfy my curiosity, but to also flip him the bird. As I approached, I slowed down a bit, not slow enough for him to approach us, but slow enough for us to get a good look. What we saw will forever be burned into our minds, one of those memories you wish you could fall and hit your head to forget. As we were now close enough to see the man's face, we could see him smiling. He was just standing there, in the dead of night, all alone, smiling at us, and never breaking eye contact. He wasn't hitchhiking or speaking or waving, he just smiled and stared right into our eyes. Gilbert started cursing and begging me to go faster, to which I obliged. This wasn't natural, something was seriously off. I went from around 40 to 55 miles per hour, and a mile down the road, the son of a bitch was there again. I almost expected him this time. As we passed, the routine began to change. This time, as we got closer, he turned to walk in the same direction we were traveling. We passed him once more, and a half mile later, there he was again. This time walking, but still looking at us, grinning ear to ear, even bigger than before. He walked, but his head was fixed on us, and he moved with robotic movement, stiff and inhuman. A sickness began to grow in my stomach. Even the air around us seemed off. Gilbert was visibly tearing up and was shaken. He kept looking over his shoulder and then let out the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard from a male. "Claudia, look!" he screamed as he turned around, looking behind us. I looked over my shoulder, and the man was behind the car. He was jogging and keeping pace with us. I looked at my speedometer, and it read 45. This was impossible, but so was passing the same man 7 times on the same road. The sick feeling in my gut turned into panic. I pressed on the gas even more and watched the needle cross the 55 mark. "Claudia!" Gilbert screamed, with his voice cracking and breaking. The man was actually gaining on us. This time, I could see him near my back door. His body and feet were moving at blurring speed, and his smile was growing more deformed by the second. It was now taking up the entire bottom of his face and literally stretching ear to ear. Gilbert was completely in shock and terrified, and so was I, but someone had to keep driving. The situation couldn't have gotten any worse or more terrifying, until it did. The man started to grow larger in size. It seemed like every mile faster I went, he grew an inch in height. I pressed my foot on the gas until it felt like I would punch right through the floorboard of the car. Being a small, compact car that wasn't built for speed, I was approaching its limit. The car began to hum as I approached the 90 miles per hour mark, and by this point, the man was close to 7 feet tall and running perfectly in sync with us. He was on Gilbert's side with his hand on the top of my car, and he was leaning down as he ran and peering in at us through Gilbert's window. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. His smile was massive and disfigured. Gilbert shoved himself to the floorboard and was sobbing, and I was out of ideas. This is where we die. I felt it in my bones. I didn't know what to do, and the car had no more speed to give us. I slammed on the brakes, and the man tripped and tumbled a few feet in front of us. I saw him getting back up slowly, and I looked at Gilbert, who was crying still. "Gilbert, pray. Pray with me right now," I screamed. I wasn't sure what that would do, if anything. It was the only thing I could think of. We couldn't outrun this thing, that was apparent, and I just didn't know what else to do. Gilbert and I tucked ourselves in the floorboards best we could, and started reciting the Lord's Prayer over and over through tears. I remember feeling Gilbert's hand grab mine, and I could hear loud footsteps approaching with a wheezing kind of giggle with them. It never came. For some reason, it never came. After about 7 minutes, I climbed up, and Gilbert did as well. We looked around, and nothing was there but us and the night. He was gone. It was gone. We wasted no time getting back on the road and didn't slow down at all. Paranoia gripped us as we constantly looked around, expecting to see the man on the side of the road or worse, next to us, but we never did. We made it home, and everything was different after that. Gilbert and I suddenly found everything we used to fight over so pointless and just done. People noticed the change in heart between us, but never knew why. I have never told this story until now, and to this day, I don't know what happened that night. I don't know who or what that thing was, and I pray I never see it again. That was the last fight we ever had. So my mother was really strict. Okay, no, she was damn strict, sometimes outright abusive. See, it was just my sister, my mother, and me, usually with the occasional random boyfriend my mom would bring home, so you can imagine everything being really tight. Food, money, space, and mostly patience were in limited supply around wherever we called home at the time. This day in particular was horrible, as I recall. My mother's then boyfriend had taken the door knobs off the door to my room, and my mum had locked me inside as punishment for turning the television off without placing it on the right channel first. So when Mum came in and sat down, she turned on the TV and bam, wrong station. She lost her mind, and there I was, sitting on the bedroom floor, looking at the walls as my mum, my sister, and Randy left for dinner. As messed up as that sounds, and it is messed up, that is not what made it horrible. She had taken my phone, killed the Wi-Fi, and my windows had been nailed shut. So yeah, I was quite literally a prisoner. Sure, I could have broken out the window and left, but eventually, she knew I'd have to come back, and it just didn't seem worth the drama anymore to fight her. Besides, I was almost 17, and I knew my days they were numbered. I occupied my time by flipping neighbors off that were passing, blaring my radio, and playing a Nintendo handheld I had hid from my mom. After a couple of hours, I got bored of even that, so I leaned against the wall and slid down to my bottom, holding one of those super bouncy rubber balls you get from a vending machine. I started throwing it against the wall opposite me and catching it as it came back. It wasn't much, but the rhythmic pattern, I guess, did something for me because I kept doing it. The sun started to set, and worst of all, I had to use the restroom. I knew they would be back any minute, so I just went in an old Pepsi bottle I had next to the bed. Sadly, I planned for these occasions. There I was, throwing the ball, catching the ball, and throwing it again. It was a vicious circle that I had no idea would take a turn into something worse. On what must have been my 7,000th throw, my reflexes slowed, and I missed the catch. It hit the knuckle on my right hand, bounced into the nightstand, and finally rolled under my bed. I kind of slouched against the wall, too lazy to go after it, but after a minute or so, I broke down and proceeded to belly crawl to the edge of my bed. When I lifted up the bed skirt to look under my bed for the ball, I became nauseous with fear at what I saw. There, crouched down on knees and elbows and sandwiched in an impossible, contorted angle, was my sister. Everything inside of me compelled me to get up and jump right through my glass window to get away from this thing, but I could not. I stared at her, and she stared at me. Her face seemed to shake and tremble as she looked back at me with glassy, teary eyes. Her hair seemed wet and greasy, and she seemed very wrong. This was not my sister. Not only did my sister leave with my mom and her boyfriend, but this was something else, something dark and not natural. She just trembled, frozen in her contorted, squished position with the ball just inches from her mouth that was now drooling onto the hardwood floor. This was my sister's body, but not her soul. It was an empty shell and something that did not belong in our world. I was frozen for how long, I do not know. Our gaze was only broken when she began to try and speak. It came out as only a groan and wheezy, no coherent words. Then I heard a crack and pop as her arm began to extend outward. I heard the front door to our home open, and Mom laughing with my sister. I jumped up and bolted to my door and began screaming and banging. Mom ran to it and opened it. She was pissed, but I didn't care. I stood in front of my sister, my real one, and hugged her. She looked at me and apologized for Mom being so cruel to me, as she could see I was visibly shaken. A year later, I joined the army and never looked back. I'm not sure why I saw what I did that day or what it meant. I just know I will never forget the day I saw my other sister. The spirit of Christmas has been a staple in the small town of Mammoth Springs, Arkansas, for as long as anyone can remember. Struggling through most of the year, a little after Halloween is when Harold and Sue find their magic. The weather is colder, and with it comes that holiday feeling that makes the small town residents' patron the old corner store for last-minute decor. The humble store that occupies a century-old building finds visitors to be plentiful. Sure, you have friends, family, and simple browsers stop in. The problem is no one is there to shop, only to visit. Since a popular big box store has opened up in nearby Thayer, Harold and Sue find it hard to make the spirit of Christmas able to compete on not only prices, but also inventory. This makes the small, single-family-owned shop a specialty and novelty store of Christmas relics long past. Sue finds it hard to force her stubborn husband and co-owner to retire, something they should have done years ago. Harold, however, is a creature of habit and shows great dedication in swearing that, "Yes, I know, Harold, someone is going to remember the good old days and come in looking for what we will have. You remind me daily, love," Sue says as she passes Harold, who is sweeping the front steps clear of leaves. The couple makes their rounds in the store, prepping to open as always for the several visitors they may get. Harold finishes dusting some glass ornaments from one of the wooden shelves and then proceeds to the back storeroom area to retrieve and stock some tinsel he had bought off of eBay. "Harold, did you buy more stuff online?" Sue interrogates. "Well, folks want real tinsel for their trees." Sue: "You know how half this stuff gets stuck in the tree and thrown out with it." Sue shakes her head as she rests her hands on her hips, staring at her husband from behind the register. "Yes, dear. But you see, if you keep buying inventory, you have to actually sell something as well. Otherwise, we're just losing money." Harold just rolls his eyes. He knows they should have retired long ago, and the days of the store turning a profit have long passed. They couldn't afford it, if not for the fact that the couple lives in the attached apartment above the store. Sue retreats upstairs to put a pot of coffee on. When she returns, she finds Harold in front of old Nick. "Harold, the coffee is done. Would you stop talking to that old thing and come move the tree stands from the front to aisle 7. Harold dismisses his wife as he returns his attention to old Nick. "Don't you mind her none, Nick. She just don't understand that we aren't doing this just for money. We are old and our time is short. This is about memories and hoping these folk care enough about M to hang onto M and pass them on. But what I need to do right now is fix your spectacles, don't I?" Harold says as he uses a half-empty tube of super glue to fuse a piece of black plastic to another on a pair of reading glasses. He places the glasses on the nose of a 6'2" heavyset statue. He wears a faded red coat and pants bound with a thick, black leather belt. The faded and yellowing white beard that old Nick wears tells of years long before he was inherited by the old couple. This routine has been in effect for the last 25 years that Harold and Sue have run the spirit of Christmas, and today is no exception. "Harold, every day you talk to old Nick, and every day you get no response. What in the hell do you think will come of this ritual?" Sue presses as she throws a pile of tree skirts behind a group of neatly stacked nutcrackers of various sizes. Harold grumbles to himself and continues, placing old Nick's glasses in place as he moves his hands down to Nick's cuffs on his coat. "What was that? Don't mumble to me. Hon. You know my hearing aid is acting up," Sue hollers, aggravated at her husband. Harold looks up from old Nick and yells, "I said I was asking old Nick where that stick up your ass came from." Sue gives an angry look at Harold and, before a rare profanity leaves her sweet lips, the door opens to the shop, sending a bell ringing throughout the place. This causes both of them to stand and look in the direction of the entrance. They are surprised to see 4 teenagers enter the small shop. It is unusual these days for anyone to enter and be interested in aging vintage Christmas decorations, much less teenagers. 3 boys and a girl all somewhere. between the ages of 18 and 20, Sue guesses. She begins to muster a hello, but the rambunctious boys and their female companions set into being quite handsy with anything in reach. The boys pick up various decorations and toss them back on the shelves with little grace and care, laughing as they do so, having their version of fun. One of the boys, the older blonde of the three, places a Santa hat atop his head and holds mistletoe over his head and the girls. "Hey Maria, how about a kiss, baby?" the boy says while making a puckered kissing face. The girl rolls her eyes dismissively, but the boy grabs her around the waist, pulling her closer. "Or a blowjob. Even better for Old Saint. Dick, her baby," he says with the girl laughing, but clearly uneasy. The other boys join in laughing as one. Takes video of the events on his cell phone. "All right then, boys. Let's ease up, huh? Most of this stuff is older than you all are." Harold intervenes, trying to calm the youths. The kids look at the old man and scowl, rolling their eyes. "Yeah, we're just messing around. Right, Maria?" one of the boys says as they pull away and begin to spread out in the store, once again handling various items with little care. Harold smells alcohol on the breath of the teens. They must have been up all night drinking to be in so early and smelling of booze. Sue is vigilant and follows the kids as best she can, feeling as though they may try and shoplift. Why these kids would want antique Christmas decorations is beyond her, but she feels it may be just the thrill they are after. One of the boys rotates down the old aisles. He paces between the lines of homemade wooden shelves that sit on a solid wood floor, solid as can be but not much for aesthetic value in the aging building. The boy, now identified as Aaron, is shorter than the others, which, unfortunately, puts him at eye level with a set of timeless glass ornaments shaped like turtle doves. "Hey Stan, look at these, dude. They look like diamonds or something," the boy says as he begins to lift and handle the delicate items. Stan, a taller boy, comes around the corner wrapped in a tree skirt, wearing it like a robe with a silver and gold wig made of tinsel in his hair. Son, could you not handle those that way?" Sue asks loudly, with the girl giggling in the background. Harold tries to be mindful of the two boys, but has his attention broken when the oldest boy takes notice of the statue of old Nick. The two boys with the glass ornaments begin to laugh as they toss the ornaments back and forth between each other, with Sue becoming quite agitated. "Okay, listen kids, if you're not buying, then just get out. I'm not having you destroy our store at the expense of your damn drunken fun," Sue shouts. The kids become aggravated, and the girl, Maria, picks up a can of artificial snow. She sprays it in the direction of Sue, who yells as she throws her hands in front of her face. Harold becomes angry and rushes over to see to his wife when the oldest boy yells out, "Hey, guys, look at this creepy shit over here." One of the boys joins the oldest boy and they circle the statue of old Nick. They begin handling him roughly and pulling at his clothes. One boy pulls out his phone as the other stands beside it and takes selfies. Maria approaches and bends down, looking at the base of old Nick, and sees a faded plaque. She mouths it out loud. "Old Nick. Hey, this is old Nick, guys. It's Santa," she says sarcastically. "Time for you all to go now. That's enough. You'll go on now, or I'm calling your parents," Harold warns firmly, his face shaking with a mix of excitement and anger. The kids laugh at him. "I'm calling your parents," Ryan yells in a mocking tone. They all chuckle as they continue to hound poor old Nick. Sue steps up with a cordless phone in her hands. "To hell with your parents, I'm calling the sheriff," she threatens loudly as her voice cracks with outrage and fear. The kids become aggravated and curse at the old couple. They then proceed to walk away, but not before vandalizing old Nick and other items within reach on their way out the door. "We're just fucking around, you old boomers. No need to be shits," the oldest yells as he kicks at the shelf holding the nutcrackers. They fall and tumble, breaking as they hit the ground. "Get the hell out, or I'm getting my gun," Harold bellows, now furious. Two of the boys grab old Nick and slam him to the ground. His newly repaired glasses break in the commotion, and with it, the last of Harold and Sue's patience. Harold reaches behind a counter and pulls up an old shotgun he surely hasn't fired in 30 years. The threat is well received, however, as the teens head for the exit fast and curse along the way. As they leave, Harold walks over to the door and locks it. He then returns to Sue and runs his shaky hand through her hair, dusting artificial snow from her forehead. They decide to call the sheriff and report the incident before simply closing the shop for the day. They'd had enough excitement for the month. The police identify the kids as some known troublemakers from a few towns overlooking to raise hell in someone else's backyard. As shook up as Harold and Sue are, they decide to let it go, remembering that they too were once kids. Much less disrespectful, but they chalk it up to the new age and drugs. Later that night, after a couple of stiff bourbons for Harold and a glass of wine for Sue, the two sleep. Sue is upstairs in bed, and Harold had fallen asleep in his recliner in front of the living room television. The peace of the night is taken when Harold is awakened by the sound of a high-pitched wailing. He opens his eyes to a hazy and smoke-filled room, nearly impossible to see. The smoke alarms blare, and had his hearing been that of a younger man, he would have had to plug his ears. His eyes begin to burn and sting from the thick smoke, and then his terror sets in. "Sue!" He yells as his fear is realized the place is on fire. He holds his hands out in front of him, feeling his way to the stairs to reach his wife, but it is no use. The fire is too furious, and he cannot climb them. He has no idea if his wife is inside or outside, alive or dead. The sound of wood splintering in the distance brings him to his knees, and he begins to heave for air and cough. Two firemen grab Harold around the waist and drag him, nearly kicking and screaming, downstairs and out of the store. It too was set ablaze. Through the smoke and chaos, Harold sees his and his wife's life's work burning around him. "Sue, Sue, my wife is inside." Harold screams through strained words in between coughing. The firefighters re-enter the home and fight their way through the flames. To the surprise of Harold and the people gathering outside, they see 3 firemen carrying his wife out. Harold is given but a glimpse of her before she is loaded into a waiting ambulance and immediately taken to the hospital. After he is seen and given a clean bill of health, he is taken to the hospital to be with Sue. As he walks down the corridor to the IQ of Mercy Hospital, he is stopped by a pair of doctors exiting her room. They won't let him enter. A feeling of panic and hopelessness washes over the poor man. They tell him that his wife has inhaled too much smoke and has died minutes ago. Harold is taken to a chair just feet away as his legs begin to buckle under the weight of the news. His store and now his wife are gone in one night. It is too much to bear, and the old man slides from his chair onto his knees. The doctors call out frantic orders, and the rest is a blur as Harold is deep within the grasps of a heart attack. The next morning, while investigators are finishing up around the store and apartment, locals ask about the events and the old couple they had known all their lives. Police conclude that a Molotov cocktail was thrown through the second-story window of the home. Harold was under the influence and did not hear the window break. The residents of Mammoth Springs are devastated, and as news spreads, the people stop by to pay their respects. One of Harold and Sue's children arrive and begin to tour the burned store. To her and her husband's surprise, one of the only surviving items is old Nick. He is slightly charred on one side, leaving a black smoke like scorching across his body and face. Parts of his coat and boots are frayed and burned, and one of his eyes is melted shut. The jolly old Nick that Harold would spend so much time with seemed to have a glassy-eyed expression, almost as if he knows what had happened. Silly, Harold's daughter thinks as she begins to weep for her dad. What monster could be responsible for this? Who would hurt Harold and Sue and want to destroy their store? And 2 days before Christmas, no less, Christmas Eve, a fairly thick snow is falling as Aaron is midway through his shift of delivering pizzas for a local pizzeria. Suddenly, his car begins to heave, making the familiar sound a car does when it has a flat tire. It plops and chugs along cumbersomely as Aaron pulls the Jeep over to the side of the empty road. Bullshit. If Dale didn't have the damn shop open, I wouldn't be in this mess. He yells as he sits behind the steering wheel, watching the snowfall quickly cover his windshield. He exits the Jeep into the frigid temperatures to check on the situation. As he suspected, the tire is flat on the 4-door Jeep, so he walks to the back and checks on his spare. To both his anger and surprise, it too is flat. What the actual fuck? Dale is paying me for this. Overtime, holiday pay, and for my damn tire. He roars as he returns to the driver's side and sits behind the wheel. He opens his cell phone and begins to through his contacts list, but stops scroll abruptly as he feels a stirring inside of his Jeep. He freezes in the driver's seat. A cold chill not brought by the weather pours over him. He slowly turns his head in the direction of the rear-view mirror and sees a dark mass behind him. He has but a fraction of a second to open his mouth and allow only a slight shriek before his scream is replaced with the sound of gurgling and muffled breathing. An 8-inch screwdriver is protruding out of the back of the driver's seat headrest and through his throat. Aaron hears several bells before he fades out of consciousness, his wide eyes staring into the rearview mirror at whatever horror claimed his life. In the upstairs corner bedroom of an unkempt farmhouse, a young couple is rounding second base. The young Ryan is trying his best to calm his pretty and nervous company. Ryan, seriously, stop. How can you even think of this shit right now after what happened to that old couple? Maria says as she begins to close her open shirt. Ryan, who is lying on top of her and still trying to plant kisses, does his best to reassure her. Maria, it was an accident. We just wanted to burn the goddamn store, not kill them. Look, it's fine. Besides, it was Stan's idea anyway. If it comes down to it, it's on him, not us. Not you. Maria shakes her head and sits up in the bed. I have to go anyway. It's getting late. Are you driving me home, or do I call my brother? Ryan sits on the bed now, unsatisfied and irritated. Whatever, Maria. You know I hate your damn brother. I'll drive you. Don't get pissed at me. I'm sorry you guys don't do anything for Christmas, but my family does. I don't want to be there, but I still have to be, you know. Ryan shakes his head. Yeah, what? The hell ever, I know. They are both brought to their feet when the sound of the television downstairs becomes abnormally loud. Ryan looks at Maria, who returns the confused and alarmed look. Ryan walks over to the door and opens it. He yells down, "Dad, turn the damn TV down." There is no reply and the television remains at a deafening volume. Ryan scowls and curses. Adding anger to frustration, he looks over at Maria. Just wait here. He's probably passed out drunk again. He then walks out the door and proceeds downstairs towards the commotion. As he suspects, he finds his father in the dark living room, illuminated only by the flickering glare of the loud television. His dad sits with his back towards Ryan in a faded and stained, green recliner from the 70s. The only thing modern in the living room is the large 65-inch flat screen that is blaring an infomercial. Ryan shakes his head at the pitiful sight. Several bottles of beer are scattered around the base of the chair his father is sitting in. Good job, Dad. Pass the hell out as usual. Merry Christmas, I guess, Ryan says as he walks over towards his unconscious father. He picks up the remote on his way and turns the volume down. Then, setting it down on an end table, he steps closer to his father. He reaches over and shakes the chair. Dad, wake up and go to bed. Dad, wake the hell up and go to bed. He shouts as he nudges the chair hard enough that he surely would have woken the old man. Ryan becomes alarmed and has a feeling of dread pour over him. Dad, he says as he reaches over and turns his father's recliner around to face him. Ryan freezes as his body becomes cold. His adrenaline surges, making his heart race wildly. His father is leaning backwards in the chair with his head tilted towards the ceiling. His eyes are wide open, the whites turn deep red with burst blood vessels. His jaw is ripped off its hinges, a 40-ounce bottle of beer shoved down his throat, widening it to inhuman levels to fit the beverage. Blood is dripping from the man's torn mouth, soaking his shirt and leaving a glimmering wetness from the glow of the infomercial. Ryan begins to scream, but not before he is grabbed from behind and yanked around by a powerful grasp. There is a brief flash of metal as the inhumanly strong hand skewers him in the stomach with a fillet knife. The blade jerks up and to the right, opening the boy's torso. Intestines spill out and hang over his belt. Ryan's eyes grow wide as his face trembles in shock. He cannot grasp what is in front of him. He simply gasps repeatedly as his hands fumble with the exposed organs in an attempt to collect them. He falls backwards into the television, sending the light from the screen across the ceiling as the TV falls with him. He tilts his head in the direction of his father's mutilated body before he closes his eyes for good. Heavy footsteps are heard moving across the living room floorboards as an unknown hand pours whiskey across the walls and furniture. It moves towards the fireplace and ignites a roll of outdated newspaper, and then tosses it into one of the whiskey-soaked walls. The flames spread quickly and wildly. Upstairs, Maria has had enough waiting. Between the horrific sounds downstairs and now smoke filling the home, setting off the smoke detectors, she decides to make a run for it. As she exits Ryan's bedroom, she stops at the top of the stairs. She sees the glow of the raging fire below, but that is not what stops her heart briefly. The shadow of a heavy-set man slowly and methodically climbs the stairs, heading in her direction. His heavy footsteps are not heard with fear or urgency. He does not worry about the fire. The smoke gets thicker, and she now feels the heat rising to her level. Between the fire and the unknown man approaching the bedroom, she decides her only choice is to jump out of the second-story window of Ryan's room. She runs over to look out the window, panicked and breathing heavily. To her dismay, there is no balcony or ledge, just a straight drop below. The only thing obstructing her path was a series of studded T-posts. She is frantic now. The fire is rising, smoke becoming unmanageable, and the footsteps now outside the bedroom door. She hears the doorknob turn and open slowly. She turns and screams in terror at what stands before her. No, fucking no, 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 she shrieks over and over. She forces her body through the window, cracking glass against her skin. She plummets toward the earth hard, but never reaches the ground. Her fall is broken by a 5-foot fence post that impales her through the stomach. She coughs and gurgles blood as the chill of the cold and snow nip at her. Her crimson blood seeps out through her wound and mouth, flooding the white-covered grass. As she fades out of consciousness, she sees her attacker standing in front of her. He turns to leave and vanishes into the thick snow only when he sees her heaving for her last breath. The sound of approaching sirens in the distance. The home of the Robinsons is empty tonight in the small subdivision just outside of Mammoth Springs and bordering Thayer. It is empty of all family who are visiting relatives this night, except for one member who insisted on staying behind. In the living room of the medium-sized home, Stan is playing a popular first-person shooter video game next to a peaceful fire that crackles and burns. Just across from him is a beautifully decorated Christmas tree that wears a pair of rare, glass turtle doves known to be found at only one store in all of Mammoth Springs. Stan is engaged in a verbal argument via his headset over a lost kill when the power to the home goes out. He curses more furious now than he was in the game. Now he can't get his revenge. He would be left in the dark, were it not for the nice, cozy fire that burns nearby. He walks over and grabs the fire poker leaning against the brick outlay and pokes at the fire. Damn breaker must have tripped. Mom, and these stupid-ass lights must have overloaded an outlet or something, he says as he grabs a flashlight from on top of the refrigerator. He makes his way to the basement towards the breaker box in the now pitch-black house, illuminated only by his flashlight. Down the old stairs and into the cold below of his home, he guides the light just in front of him in the direction of the breaker box. When he reaches it, he is shocked to find that someone had shut off the power. From inside the home, his anger and frustration turns to fear. He turns the power back on and rushes back upstairs to the fire where he left his cell phone next to his game controller. When he arrives, he picks up his phone and begins to call 911. But before he can confirm the outgoing call, he notices the fire poker is now gone. His worry is uncontrollable, for he knows that he is not alone. Stan begins to sweat as his worry becomes animalistic fear when, to his horror, the power is shut off once more, causing his eyes to dart around wildly and his breathing to increase. He hits send on his phone and a 911 operator picks up. To the shock of the operator, who is asking what is the nature of the emergency, she receives no direct answer, but instead hears terrified Stan yelling in a broken voice to someone from the other end of the line. You. How the foo? How the fuck is this possible? No. The police arrive a short time later. They make entry into the home and are both sickened and confused by what they find. The body of Stan lies at the foot of the Christmas tree, his head crushed in like a deflated football, and blood is sprayed across nearly everything in the immediate vicinity. To the officer's horror and sheer confusion, in the chair where Stan once sat playing his video game, now sits a half-charred and burned figure, his faded and smoke-stained red coat and pants covered in blood. The rhythmic, timed lights from the Christmas tree nearby slightly illuminate a face that was once jolly, a face that is now half melted and charred on the right side. The left side, however, still has his twinkle in his eye, and its jolly grin seems more menacing and pronounced against the Christmas tree's glow. The officers see the bloodied fire poker, sitting in the lap of old Nick, who, in the spirit of giving, once again gave to those exactly what they deserved.